morning, everyone. Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Shall we begin the session? Yes, Friday's class was cancelled. So let's begin with the next topic, that is chapter number 30, Java networking, right? First of all, any doubts anyone in the previous class or the last to last class, anything that you want to ask regarding the assignments, regarding the... Yeah, Joseph, you have a doubt in the quality system in IT assignment, right? So after the class, we will discuss about that assignment. Yeah, there are two tasks, that is task number 3 and 4, that are related with each other. So we will discuss after the class. Okay. So shall we begin right now? So first of all, some basic concepts of the networking. Can anyone tell me what is the difference between the TCP and the UDP? Yes, these are the protocol, two common protocol, network protocol that is used in the Java networking. Yes, TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol, that is available. UDP stands for User Datagram Protocol, that is also available. But I'm talking about the difference between the TCP and the UDP. Yes, very good. TCP is a connection-oriented protocol and UDP is a connection-less protocol. So when we use the term network programming, that refers to writing the program that executes across multiple devices, across the multiple computers, in which the devices are all connected with each other. Yes, they are connected with each other with the help of the network. And there's a Java.NET package of the J2SE that contains a collection of the classes and the interfaces that provide the low-level communication details that allows you to write the programs that focus on solving the problem. So there are two protocols that is available. One is the TCP, one is the UDP that we have discussed. And these two protocols are the category of, or the suite of the TCP IP protocol. So one is a socket programming, one is a URL processing. And URL stands for the Uniform Resource Locator and represents a resource on the www, such as the web page or the FTP directory. And this section also allows you to write a Java program that communicates with the URL, and that can be broken down into the multiple parts that will be available. So that multiple parts will be protocol, then HTTP host, then port number, path, query reference. Now, what are the various examples of the protocol that is available in the URL processing? That is HTTP, HTTPS, that is secure file transfer protocol, FTP, simple mail transfer protocol, that is SMTP. Now this is the URL to the web page whose protocol is the HTTP. This is the HTTP, then www.amroot.com, index.htm, then language equals to English, that is en hash J2SE. Now notice that the URL that does not specify a port, in which case the default port for the protocol that is used. So default port number of the HTTP is port number 80. That we have discussed already. Now these are the multiple methods, or the class method that represents a URL and has a complete set of the method to manipulate the URL in the Java. So this is the java.net.url class. And this class has several constructors for creating a URL includes the following. One is a public URL that includes the protocol or the prototype as a string protocol, string host, import, and the string file. So there are four types of the argument that is passed over here. One is a protocol that is a string type. One is the host name that is also of the string type. Then port number that is of the integer. Then file that is also of the string type. This method creates a URL by putting together all the given parts. The next is a public URL. This also contains three arguments, three prototype. One is a protocol, one is a host, one is a file. This is identical to the previous constructor except that the default port for the given protocol that is used that is available. Then public URL, string URL that throws the malformed URL exception. So this creates a URL from the QL string. The next is a public URL context, string URL that also stores a malformed URL exception that creates a URL by passing together the URL as well as a string arguments. And this class contains many methods for accessing the various parts of the URL that is being represented, that is being used. Now, some of the method that is used with the URL that includes this one. So when it's a public string get path, now this returns the path of the URL. Path of the URL means that may be absolute path, that may be a relative path. So this returns the path of the URL. Then get query, this returns the query part of the URL. Then get authority, that returns the authority of the URL. Then get port number or port number of the URL. Default port, as I said, that this is the 80 for the HTTP. Then get default port, this is another protocol, another we can say the function that is used over in the public int get default port. Now this is for the public type and int is the return type for this one because port number, for example, this is the default port is the 80s, that is of the integer category. So this is public int get default port. When public string get protocol, what is the protocol that is available? So we are accessing the protocol, that is a get protocol. This returns the protocol of the URL. Then public string get host. Now this returns the host name of the URL. This is also the string type. That's why it is the return type of this is the string. Then public string get host. Then next one is a public string get file. So this returns a file name of the URL. Then get reference part of the URL. Then URL connection, open connection throws input output exception. So this opens a connection to the URL that allows a client to communicate with the resources, with the various resources that is available. That opens a connection with the URL that also allows a communicate or also allows a client to communicate with one another with the resources. Now, yes, because when we get the port number that is of the integer type, that is in the numeric field, and when we get the protocol that is of the string type, that may be FTP protocol, that may be SMTP protocol, that is of the string, that is a collection of the characters. Yes, public is okay, that is for the function, but the return type is either we are using the int, we are using the string, either we are using the char. But this is a collection of the characters, so we are using the string. Now this is the example that shows how. So just read out this program. If there is any doubt, then please. Everything is same. We are using the system.out.println. URL is URL2 string get protocol. Everything is same. That means we are getting the string, we are getting the protocol authority. This is the same program that we have discussed in the last class. So just read it and clarify the doubts if there's any doubts. And now everyone is, yes, everyone is done with the program. first two lines are the same. That is for the importing java.net, java.input output, all the files that is imported from the network for the input output operations. Then there is a public class URL demo. We have created one of the class of the public category, that is a URL demo. Then public static void main string args. Then we are using try block and catch block. This is URL. Then variable is URL, then it goes to new URL argument 0. So argument 0 means we are creating argument 0 at the 0th place. Then system.out.println. For printing purpose, this is used system.out.println. That is URL is URL.toString. So we are using the toString function for getting out the toString or for getting out the string. Then again the same URL.protocol, then URL.getAuthority, then URL.getFile. Everything is same, but we are using whatever we have enclosed in the double quotes. For example, this is the double quote that is available. So this is enclosed within a double quote. So this will print as it is. And this will fetch the value from the with the help of the toString function. Then URL.getProtocol, then URL.getAuthority, then URL.getFile, then getHost, getPath, getPort, getDefault port, then getQuery, then getReference. So these are the queries that is executed for the println, that is executed for the various URLs. One is a toString, getProtocol, getAuthority, then getFile, getHost, getPath, getPort, then get default port, then get query, then get reference. So yes, first one gives a URL, then second one gives a protocol, then third one gives authority, then fourth one, what is the file name, then what is the host name, get host, get path is path name, then port is get port, port number, then default port is default port number, whatever the port number that is available, then get query, that is a query, whatever the query that is fetching out, then reference, that is also by using the get reference. Then e.print stack trace, then again there is the closing braces of this one, then closing braces, then again closing braces. So there are three closing braces of this one because we have opened three closing braces, or we have opened that three braces. Now this is the example, or this is the output of this. This is the Java URL demo, http www.emroot.com, index HTML, everything is same. Then URL is given over here. This is URL. Then protocol is HTTP. Authority. Authority means the site name or the website. That is www.emroot.com. Then file name is index.html. Then language equals to EN. Then host name is www.emroot.com. Then path is index.html. This is a path, and the port number is -1, but the default port is always 80. Then query is a language EN. Then the reference is J2SC. Now next is any doubts? Okay, next is a URL connection class methods that is used or that returns a Java, or that is used with the open connection method that returns our java.net.url connection, that is an abstract class whose subclasses represents the various types of URL connections. For example, if you connect to a URL whose protocol is HTTP, so there is an open connection method that returns an HTTP URL connection request. That means whenever you connect to a URL whose protocol is HTTP, protocol means whatever the protocol, whatever the version that is available, that is HTTP. So we are using the open connection method that returns an HTTP URL connection object. Now, if you connect to a URL that represents a jar file, then the open connection represents always or returns a jar URL connection object. So that represents a jar URL connection object. Now these are many functions, so this also gets many function or contains many function with the description. One is a get content that retrieves the contents of this URL connection, then get content classes, then get content encoding. So this returns the value of the content encoding header files. Then get content length, so this returns the value of the content length header field. Then get content type. Then get last modifier. That means when the header will be, yes, last modified. Then get expiration. This returns a value of the expires header field. Then get lf modified since. So this returns the value of the objects if modified since field. Then public void set do input, that is a boolean input. So this passes the entry to denote that the connection will be used for the input, and the default value is always given as a true. Now, one of the question arises in the assignment that what is the default value when we set the set do input. I think this is available in the assignment. The default value is a true because the clients typically reads from a URL connection. So in the same way, there's a set do output also, that is for the boolean output, but the default value in the output is always false. Then input stream, get input stream, whatever the input URL connection or the input stream that is available for reading to the resources, then writing to the resources, one that is the output stream. So one is the input, one is the output stream. Then the URL get URL that this URL connection object is connected to. So one is a URL get URL, one is a do input, do output, input stream that throws the input output exception, then get output stream, expiration, modification streams. Now let's see a demo program that connects to a URL entered from the command line. This is the file name URL connect demo.java. So if the URL represents an HTTP resource, the connection is cast to the HTTP URL connection. This is the import java.net, then import java.input output. Then public class URL connection demo, that is a URL. Then public static void main, that is the main function. Then use the try block. In this one we are we are declaring a variable of the URL that is equals to the new URL argument 0. Then URL connection, that is a URL connection equals to URL.open connection. Now we are opening the connection first of all. Now checking for the null values. If there is any null values, then only yes. If there is any null value, then directly terminates the connection. This is the URL connection. URL connection equals to URL.open connection, then HTTP URL connection, then connection equals to null. Now, if the URL connection is an instance of HTTP URL connection, then connection equals to HTTP URL connection, then URL connection. So this is one of the example that is given for the URL connection. That is an example of that is an instance of HTTP URL connection. Otherwise, or that is else, system.out.println for printing, please enter an HTTP URL. So if it is available, then it's okay. Otherwise, please ask from the user that is printed with the use of the system.out.println, please enter an HTTP URL. Now there's a buffer reader that is read it out with the new that is supported in the new input stream reader. Connection get input stream, then string URL string equals to, then string current, while current equals to in dot read line is not equals to null. Though whatever the read line, whatever the input that we are giving, that is not equals to null, then URL string plus equals to current. Then system.out.println URL string catch input output exception E. So after this one, this is checking for the current line. This is while current equals to in dot read line is not equals to null, then URL string that is plus equals to current. That means it is adding out with one and it is stored, or the current is adding out in the URL string one by one. Then system.out.println URL string, then catch input output exception E. So after the try block, there is a catch that is representing with the input output exception E, then E dot print stack trace. That means we are calling the function of the print stack trace with the help of the input output exception, that is a E. It is also known as a variable of the input output exception. This is a E dot print stack trace. Yes, whenever we are using the input output or whenever we are using the print stack trace function that is represented, that is used with the input output function, that is used with print stack trace function. Now this is a sample run of the thread program that will produce the outputs. It's the Java. This is the URL that is given. URL connection demo http www.amroot.com. This is the complete HTML contents of the home page of the amroot.com. So any doubt in this program? That is used for the URL connection, that is for the open connection, then representing the value as a null, then HTTP URL connection. This is the output, that is the complete HTML home page of amroot.com. Now next is the socket programming, that is again using the between the two computer, that is using the TCP, and the client program creates a socket on its end of the communication and attempts to connect that socket to a server. And whenever the connection is made, that is a connection oriented protocol, because TCP is a connection oriented protocol. So whenever a connection is made, the server creates a socket object on its end of the communication, and the client and the server can now communicate by writing to and reading from the socket. So this is also for the writing, this is also for the reading. And we are using a socket class, that is a java.net.socket class that represents a socket, and this is a socket class that provides a mechanism. That means we can say that this contains a library function that provides a mechanism for the server program to listen for the clients and also establish a connection with them. Now there are a few steps that occurs when establishing a TCP connection between the two objects or between two computers using the sockets, that is used with the server socket object that denoting which port number communication is to occur on. For example, there is a default port number that is available. That default port number is 80, and then server invokes the accept command. So first of all, it is initialized with the server socket object that denotes with the port number, that it invokes with the accept function of the server socket class, that then this method waits until a clients connect to the server on a given port. After the server is waiting, the client initialize a server object or the socket object that specify the server name, port number, and extra detail, whatever the detail that is available with the client. And the constructor of the socket class also attempts to connect to the client to the specified server and the port number. And if the communication is established, that means communication is fulfilled, then the client now has a socket object capable of communicating with the server. On the server side, the accept function also returns a reference to a new socket on the server that is connected to the client computer, the client socket. Once everything is done, once connections are established, the communication can occur using the input-output stream that can use both as an output stream as well as an input stream. That is connected to the server's input stream and the client input stream that is connected to the server's output stream. And TCP is a two-way communication protocol, so data can be sent across both the streams at the same time, and there are useful classes that also provide a complete set of the methods to implement the socket. Now these are the various methods or the class method that is used with the server socket. One is a pub. Yes, this is also available in the java.net.socket class only or server socket class only. So first is a public server socket import throws input output exception. This attempts to create a server socket bound to the specified port, and there is an exception that occurs if the port is already bound by another application. That means this is again just like we are opening the file, if the file is already available, or sorry, if the database is already used, so this that creates an error. In the same way, this creates an error whenever there is an exception that occurs if the port is already bound by the other applications. And then public server socket that also throws input output exception that is used with the previous constructor. The backlog parameter specifies how many incoming client to store in a wait queue. That means yes, this is yes, right. Then public server socket. In this there are three parameters. One is a port number, one is a backlog, one is address. That is similar to the previous constructor that is used with the init address parameter that specifies the local IP address to the bind to, and this address is used for the server that has multiple IP addresses that allows the server also specifies which IP address to accept, addresses which to not accept. The next is a public server socket that is used with the constructor used with the bind method when you are ready to bind the server socket method. So these are the few methods that is used to obtain and listen for the client request. This means, yes, if the constructor does not throw an exception, that means your application is successfully bound with the specified port and is ready for the client request. That means everything is okay. You're only accepting the clients, you're only accepting the port number, exception occurs, that is port is already bound by the another application. These are the common methods for the server socket class only. That is the public int get local port number. Then this public server accept throws input output exceptions. Then timeout, that is a void store timeout, that is an in timeout function. Then in backlog. Next is a server only the socket class method that is available in the java.net.socket class that represents a socket that both the client and the server uses to communicate with each other. That also obtains a socket object by initializing one, whereas a server obtains a socket object from the return value of the accept method only. And this class of 5 constructor that is used with the client how to use to connect to a server. So one is a socket that attempts to connect to the specified server at the specified port. So given as a host, then port number that throws the unknown host exception, input output exception. Then public socket init address host init port that throws the input output exception. This method is identical to the previous constructor except that the host is denoted by the init address object. Then public socket host port int address local address that also throws the input output exception. Then init address host port address local address. Then public socket that creates an unconnected socket use this method to connect to the server or this socket to the server. And whenever the socket constructor returns, it does not simply initialize a socket but object but also attempts to connect to the specified server and the port. Now, these are the functions that is used with the socket class in which both the client and server have a socket object. We assume. So one is a public void connect, then public init address get init address, then public int get port, get local port numbers, then socket address get remote socket address, then public input stream get input stream throws input output exception, then output stream, then void close that also throws the input output exception. This is one of the example of server socket server example. Now next is how to send the email with the use of Java, that is a Java sending email that I'm going to cover within the next class, that is the tomorrow's class. So till now, any doubts, anyone in this? Any doubt in the assignments, any doubt in the any doubt in this topic, that is the Java, and anything that you want to ask? Yes, Mitty Benjamin, that anything that you want to clarify? Okay, all right. Okay, we will